My name is Riley, and I was 7 years old when my brother Tommy was born. He came into this world too early. I remember pressing my nose against the glass, watching him lie there in that clear box with tubes and wires everywhere. That was the beginning of when everything changed. Mom switched to part-time work to spend more time with Tommy. She'd sit for hours in the rocking chair beside his incubator, just watching him breathe. Dad would rush to the hospital straight from work, not even stopping to say hello to me at home. When Tommy finally came home, things didn't get better, they got worse. Mom would jump at his smallest whimper, while I learned to take care of myself. I started making my own sandwiches for lunch because Mom was too busy feeding Tommy. I learned to tie my shoes and do my hair because no one had time to help me anymore. The first time I really understood how different things were was during my 8th birthday. Mom and Dad forgot about it completely. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, waiting for someone to say something, to bring out a cake, or even just wish me happy birthday. Instead, Mom was busy trying to get Tommy to eat his breakfast, and Dad was reading the newspaper. It wasn't until my teacher, Mrs. Roberts, called home that evening to wish me happy birthday that Mom remembered. She quickly threw together a small cake and gave me one of Tommy's old stuffed animals as a present, still with his name written on the tag. I learned to find comfort elsewhere, mainly at my Aunt Sarah's house. She was Dad's younger sister, and unlike my parents, she actually saw me. Her husband, Uncle Mark, and their daughter Emma became my real family in many ways. They lived just across town, and I started spending more and more time there. She'd take me shopping with Emma, buying us matching outfits and treating us exactly the same. One time, Mom saw me wearing a new dress Aunt Sarah had bought me. Her face twisted into something between anger and shame. "Sarah, you're spoiling her," she complained on the phone that evening. "We can't afford to keep up with your gifts." The truth was, they could afford plenty for Tommy. He got new toys almost every week, while I wore the same clothes until they literally fell apart. I remember one particular incident when I was 11 that still makes my blood boil when I think about it. My teacher pulled Mom aside after school one day. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm concerned about Riley," Ms. Thompson said quietly. "She's been wearing the same clothes for 2 months now. They're getting quite worn." Mom's face turned red. "Oh, those are just her favorite clothes," she lied smoothly. "She insists on wearing them. You know how children are." But when we got home, Mom's embarrassment turned to rage. She grabbed my arm so hard it left marks. "How dare you shame us like that?" she screamed, striking me across the face. "Do you want everyone to think we're bad parents?" I wanted to scream back that they were bad parents, at least to me. But I just stood there, holding my stinging cheek, watching as Tommy played with his brand new remote control car in the next room. By the time Tommy turned 8, I'd become more of a live-in maid than a daughter. Every morning started the same way: wake up early, make breakfast for everyone, pack Tommy's lunch, and clean up after them all. The dishes were always waiting for me when I got home from school, along with a list of other chores Mom had thought up during the day. One evening, after spending hours cooking dinner, doing laundry, and helping Tommy with his homework, I finally broke down. My hands were raw from scrubbing pots, and my back ached from standing all day. "Mom, I'm exhausted," I said, my voice cracking. "Can't someone else help with the housework?" Dad looked up from his phone just long enough to say, "You're 13 now, Riley. You're old enough to help around the house. That's what responsible adults do." "But Tommy doesn't have to do anything," I protested. "Tommy's still young," Mom snapped. "He needs time to be a child." I wanted to scream that I was still a child too, but what was the point? Instead, I found myself spending more and more time at Aunt Sarah's house. Their home became my sanctuary, a place where I could just be a kid. Emma was 5 years younger than me, but she became like the little sister I wished Tommy had been. We'd spend hours creating elaborate structures, something I never got to do at home because Tommy would always destroy anything I built. Sometimes I'd stay overnight, sleeping in their spare room that gradually accumulated some of my things: a toothbrush, some pajamas, a few books. My parents never called to check where I was. I don't think they even noticed I was gone most of the time. Uncle Mark became the father figure I desperately needed. He'd often find me doing homework at their kitchen table late into the evening. "You know, Riley," he said one night, helping me with my algebra, "your parents might not see it, but you've got a bright future ahead of you. You need to focus on your studies though. Get good grades, win those scholarships, because I hate to say it, but I don't think your parents are planning to help with college." His words hit hard, but they also gave me purpose. I threw myself into my studies with renewed determination. I joined the school's debate club, staying late after school 3 days a week to practice. I entered every academic competition I could find: science fairs, essay contests, math Olympics. I won first place in the regional debate championship, beating students from 15 other schools. The local newspaper even did a small write-up about it. When I showed the article to my parents at dinner, Mom glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, dear. Oh, Tommy, tell Riley about how you scored a goal in soccer practice today." But their indifference only made me work harder. I started taking advanced placement classes, staying up late to complete extra credit assignments. My teachers noticed, even if my parents didn't. They started suggesting summer academic programs and college prep courses. When I turned 16, I got my first real job at the Sunshine Cafe, working as a waitress after school. For the first time in my life, I had my own money, earned by my own efforts. The first paycheck felt like freedom in my hands. I remember staring at the numbers on the paper, already planning what I could buy, maybe some new clothes that actually fit, or school supplies I wouldn't have to beg for. But my brief moment of independence didn't last long. Mom cornered me in the kitchen one evening, Dad standing behind her with his arms crossed. "So," she said, her voice sharp, "when were you planning to tell us about your job? You're making money while living under our roof, eating our food, using our utilities." Dad nodded. "We've decided that it's only fair you contribute to the household expenses. Half of your paycheck should cover it." Still, even with half my earnings gone, I managed to save enough to buy myself a smartphone. Nothing super fancy, but it was new, and it was mine, the first real piece of technology I'd ever owned. I'd been using an ancient flip phone that could barely send texts, while Tommy had the latest iPhone. I was so proud of that phone. I downloaded educational apps, used it to take notes in class, even joined some study groups online. For a week, everything was perfect. Then Tommy spotted me using it. "Hey, that's a nice phone," he said, walking into my room without knocking. "Way better than that piece of junk you had before. Give it to me." I clutched the phone tighter. "No way. I bought this with my own money." His face twisted into that familiar spoiled expression. "Come on, my phone is getting old. I need a new one." When I refused again, he stormed out. I could hear him thundering down the stairs, and I knew exactly where he was going. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, Mom and Dad appeared in my doorway. "Riley," Dad said in his reasonable voice that was anything but reasonable, "your brother tells us you're being selfish." "I bought this phone myself," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "With the money I earned after giving you half of my paycheck." They left eventually, but not before calling me ungrateful, selfish, and a terrible sister. I went to bed that night with my phone clutched tight to my chest. 3 days later, I found it in pieces on my bedroom floor. The screen was shattered, the case cracked open like someone had deliberately stomped on it. When I confronted Tommy, he just smirked. "Maybe you should take better care of your things," he said with a shrug. "Stuff breaks sometimes." The day my college acceptance letters arrived should have been one of the happiest days of my life. All those late nights studying, the extra classes, the academic competitions, they had finally paid off. 3 colleges had accepted me: Riverside University, Wellington College, and our local state university. I sat on my bed, spreading the letters out in front of me. Riverside and Wellington were my dream schools, but they both required substantial tuition payments. State University wasn't as prestigious, but they'd offered me a full scholarship. The choice was obvious. I couldn't afford to pay for college on my own, and I knew better than to expect help from my parents. There was just one catch. The acceptance letter from State University included a note about housing. As you reside within city limits, you do not qualify for student housing. Our dormitories are reserved for out-of-state and long-distance students only. I decided to share the news with my parents over dinner that night. Tommy was there too, shoveling pasta into his mouth while playing some game on his phone, the latest model, of course. I got accepted to college, I announced, trying to keep the pride in my voice. 3 of them, actually. I'm going to attend State University, they're offering me a full scholarship. To my surprise, both my parents looked up. Mom even smiled. Well, that's wonderful, Riley, Dad said, actually sounding pleased for once. You see what hard work can accomplish? I felt a warm glow in my chest. Maybe things were finally changing. Maybe they were finally seeing me. Then Mom cleared her throat. Now that you're going to be an adult student, we need to discuss your living arrangements. We've decided you should pay rent. When they named the amount, I literally choked on my pasta. Tommy had to pound me on the back, looking far too amused by my distress. That's almost $1,000. I gasped when I could breathe again. That's impossible. I can't afford that. Mom shrugged, taking a delicate bite of her dinner. We pay rent for this house every month, Riley. Have been for years. You're an adult now, it's time you learned about real-world responsibilities. But I'll be a full-time student, I protested. Even if I worked 2 part-time jobs, I couldn't make that much. My parents exchanged a look I'd seen many times before, the one that meant trouble for me. Well, Dad said slowly, if you can't contribute to the household expenses, perhaps it's time you found your own place to live. Time to stand on your own 2 feet. But what about Tommy? I couldn't help asking. Will he have to pay rent when he turns 18? That's different, Dad snapped. Your brother has special needs. Special needs? Tommy was perfectly healthy now, hadn't had any health issues since he was a toddler. But I knew arguing was pointless. I spent the next 2 days packing my life into boxes and bags. It wasn't much, years of being the less favored child meant I didn't have many possessions. Each item I packed felt like a reminder of all the things I'd never had, all the love I'd never received. As I carried my last box out the front door, I heard Tommy's voice behind me. Finally, he crowed. I'm going to turn your room into the ultimate gaming setup. Maybe I'll put the big TV where your bed was, and the gaming chairs can go by the window. With nowhere else to go, I found myself standing on Aunt Sarah's doorstep that night, trying to hold back tears as I rang the doorbell. Uncle Mark opened the door, took one look at my face and the bags at my feet, and immediately called for Aunt Sarah. They did what? Aunt Sarah's voice rose in fury as I explained what had happened. They kicked you out? Their own daughter? Because I couldn't pay their rent, I said, my voice breaking. They said since I'm 18 now. I don't care if you're 18 or 80, Uncle Mark interrupted, his face red with anger. You're staying with us. No arguments. That night, as I lay in their guest room, my room now, I finally let myself cry. Not just from sadness or fear, but from relief. For the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. I spent that summer working full-time at the Sunshine Cafe, saving every penny I could for college expenses. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark refused to let me pay rent or buy groceries, insisting I focus on preparing for school. When fall came, I started my classes at State University. It was hard work, balancing studies with my part-time job at the cafe, but I was determined to succeed. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark treated me exactly like they treated Emma, helping me with assignments, celebrating my achievements, even insisting I join them on their family vacation to the beach. It was strange, being treated as an equal member of the family. Every time they included me in family photos, every time they introduced me as our Riley to their friends, every time they hung my achievements on the wall next to Emma's, it healed a little piece of my heart. My parents and Tommy? they became strangers. Whenever we passed each other on the street, they would look right through me, as if I were invisible. It hurt at first, but gradually, I realized it hurt less than when they had been in my life. But Tommy couldn't leave well enough alone. One afternoon, during my shift at the cafe, he walked in with a group of his friends. I knew immediately from his smirk that this wasn't a coincidence. Well, he drawled loudly as I approached their table. Look who it is, guys, my sister the waitress. Still serving coffee after college? Really living the dream, huh? His friend snickered. I kept my face neutral, pulled out my order pad. Welcome to Sunshine Cafe. What can I get for you? Oh, I don't know. Tommy made a show of studying the menu. What would you recommend? I mean, you're the expert on cheap food, right? More laughter from his friends. Tommy spent the next 20 minutes ordering and then sending back everything I brought, complaining that the coffee was too hot, then too cold, that his sandwich had too much mayo, then not enough. Maybe if you'd studied something useful instead of just running away from home, he said loudly as I cleared their table, you wouldn't be stuck in this dead-end job. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't stuck anywhere, that I was working here by choice while I pursued my real career goals. But I just kept clearing the table, remembering what Aunt Sarah always said, some people are so small inside that they can only feel big by making others feel small. After graduating college, I landed an entry-level position at Anderson & Mills Consulting. The salary wasn't amazing, but it was steady, and more importantly, it was a foot in the door. I threw myself into the work with the same determination that had gotten me through school. After my second paycheck, I found a small one-bedroom apartment across town. When I told Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark I was moving out, they both got teary-eyed. Are you sure you don't want to stay longer? Aunt Sarah asked, helping me pack. You know you're always welcome here. I hugged her tight. I know, but it's time for me to stand on my own feet. Besides, I'll visit so often you'll get sick of me. And I kept that promise. Every Sunday dinner, every holiday, random weeknight visits, I made sure they knew they were still my family. Emma would come crash at my apartment for sister sleepovers when she needed a break from college life, and I'd help her with her assignments just like Uncle Mark had once helped me. Years passed, and I worked my way up the corporate ladder. Late nights, weekend projects, additional certifications, I did whatever it took. My dedication paid off. By the time I was 28, I'd been promoted to Senior Operations Director, managing a team of 30 people and earning more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. I'm thinking of buying a house, I announced one Sunday over dinner at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark's. Something with a nice yard, maybe even a pool. That's wonderful, Aunt Sarah beamed. Oh, that reminds me. I ran into your mother at the grocery store last week. I tried to tell her how well you're doing. I thought maybe after all these years. She shook her head. She cut me off before I could finish. Said she doesn't have a daughter and doesn't care what you're doing. The words hung in the air like poison. Uncle Mark reached over and squeezed my hand, but I wasn't sad. In fact, for the first time in years, I felt absolutely clear about what I needed to do. The next day, I called my friend Jennifer, who worked as a realtor. Hey Jen, I need a favor. Can you find out who owns the house at 1247 Maple Street? Jennifer called back with the owner's contact information. Mr. Peterson had owned the property for over 20 years, the entire time my family had been renting it. My hand shook slightly as I dialed his number. Mr. Peterson? My name is Riley Anderson. I'm interested in buying your property on Maple Street. I'm prepared to offer 20% above market value. Cash deal, quick closing. 2 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office, signing the final paperwork. As I wrote my name on the last page, I couldn't help but smile. The house where I'd experienced so much pain was now mine. My parents and Tommy were still living there, completely unaware that their landlord had changed. I called Jennifer again the next day. One more favor, I said. Could you contact my parents as their real estate agent? Tell them the house has a new owner who wants to inspect the property and discuss their lease. Just don't mention my name. Oh, I am going to enjoy this, Jennifer laughed. When do you want to do it? We set the date for the following Tuesday. I spent the morning reviewing the property documents, making sure everything was in perfect order. As I drove to my old house, my heart was pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left it 6 years ago. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. Her face went from confusion to shock to anger in the span of seconds. Riley, what are you doing here? She demanded. Dad appeared behind her, and I could hear Tommy's heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. Get out, Dad snapped. We're waiting for someone important. The new owner of the house is coming to inspect the property. I smiled, reached into my briefcase, and pulled out the deed. Oh, he's already here. I bought the house 2 weeks ago. Would you like to see the documentation? The silence that followed was deafening. Tommy had reached the bottom of the stairs now, his mouth hanging open. That's impossible, Dad stammered. Actually, it's quite possible when you're a senior operations director at one of the city's top consulting firms, I replied, stepping past them into the house, my house. Mr. Peterson was quite happy with my offer. The transformation in their faces was almost comical. Mom's scowl melted into a sickly sweet smile. Riley, sweetheart, she cooed, why don't you come sit down? I'll make some tea. We can catch up. Like a proper family, Dad added quickly. Family? I couldn't help but laugh. The same family that threw me out on the street when I couldn't pay their astronomical rent? The same family that told everyone they didn't have a daughter? Now, Riley, Mom started, we were just trying to teach you responsibility. Oh, I learned responsibility, I cut her off. I learned it very well. In fact, let's discuss your new rent terms. I named the new monthly amount, double what they'd been paying. The color drained from their faces. That's impossible, Tommy exploded. We can't afford that. Where are we supposed to get that kind of money? I shrugged, echoing their words from years ago. Not my problem. You have until the 1st of next month to either pay the new rate or move out. They followed me to the door, their tones switching rapidly between pleading and threatening. Mom tried to grab my arm, but I pulled away. Riley, please, she begged. We're your family. No, I said firmly. You stopped being my family the day you chose your comfort over your daughter's future. You have 30 days to decide what you're going to do. 1 month later, I stood across the street, watching as my parents and Tommy loaded the last of their belongings into a moving truck. They'd tried calling me multiple times over the past weeks, alternating between begging for more time and threatening legal action. I hadn't answered a single call. Mom noticed me first. She nudged Dad, who looked up from the box he was carrying. The hatred in their eyes was palpable. Tommy slammed the truck's rear door with unnecessary force, glaring in my direction. None of them said a word to me, they just got into their vehicles and drove away, leaving behind the house they'd rented for over 2 decades. I waited until they were gone before walking up to my property. My property. The word still felt strange in my mind. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house felt bigger now, emptier, but still heavy with memories. Over the next 3 months, I transformed the house completely. The walls that had witnessed my tears came down, creating an open-concept living space. The kitchen where I'd spent countless hours cooking for an ungrateful family was gutted and modernized. Tommy's precious game room, my old bedroom, became a home office with large windows and built-in bookshelves. Every change felt like erasing another painful memory. The contractor stripped the old wallpaper, and with it went the marks where I'd once measured my height alone because no one else cared to do it. The creaky floorboard that had always betrayed my late-night study sessions disappeared under new hardwood. The stained carpet that had held years of spills I'd been forced to clean up was replaced with sleek tiles. It looks amazing, Aunt Sarah said when I gave her Uncle Mark, and Emma the Grand Tour. It doesn't even look like the same house anymore. That was the point, I replied, leading them onto the new back deck, my favorite addition to the house. We sat there drinking lemonade, my real family, watching the sunset over the backyard where a swing set once stood. Now there was a garden starting to bloom, new life springing from old soil. I never saw my parents or Tommy again after that day they moved out. Sometimes I heard snippets about them through the neighborhood grapevine. They'd moved to a small apartment across town. Tommy had finally moved out on his own when the reality of apartment living didn't suit him. But their lives weren't my concern anymore. My life was here, in this renovated house that no longer held ghosts, with Sunday dinners at Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mark's, movie nights with Emma, and holiday celebrations filled with genuine love and laughter. I had finally found what I'd been looking for all along, not revenge, not success, but the simple truth that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about love, support, and choosing to be there for each other, no matter what.